Yeah, I apologize. There's so much going on today. It's harder than usual for me to keep track of everything, but I thought it would be appropriate just to review very quickly what this agreement is that Israel is breaking, the ceasefire agreement. You all know or may remember it was announced last spring, adopted by the Security Council, and then repeated in July. And of course, Israel didn't agree to what was supposed to be their own proposal until, December, or the beginning of January, actually. And so it had three parts. The first part was an exchange of a certain number of prisoners on both sides, and Israel's first partial withdrawal from the corridor that cut Gaza in half, and then eventually the complete withdrawal from that, which they did do. And at the end of the first phase, they were supposed to withdraw from the Rafah corridor, that is the border between Gaza and Egypt, that sometimes is referred to as the Philadelphia corridor, in case you're confused by that. And that was supposed to happen at the end of phase one, which Israel has refused to do in violation of the agreement that they signed and their treaty with Egypt, which forbids Israel from militarizing that border. Phase two was supposed to involve the mutual release of more prisoners, including bodies of people who died in captivity on both sides, and negotiations for a long-term or permanent ceasefire. And phase three, and those negotiations leading up to that were supposed to start weeks ago, which Israel has refused to do. And then phase three involved negotiations on the rebuilding of Gaza and who would be the interim authority there. So Israel signed this agreement, and then in the recent weeks, if you followed, has demanded that it be changed and renegotiated. And the reporting was confused at first, a little less so now, but for the ordinary people, the first report was that Hamas was refusing to negotiate an extension of the ceasefire, which of course is a lie. They have kept to the terms of the ceasefire very, very fully and carefully. Meanwhile, Israel, even during phase one, which was supposed to be a ceasefire, has continually fired on Gaza and restricted the entry into Gaza of the specifically denoted relief supplies that were in the agreement, especially tents and temporary housing shelters. So Israel, and apparently with the support of the United States, is demanding instead that there be no phase two and that just the hostages or the prisoners on both sides be released. And Israel is free to resume its attack on Gaza whenever it so chooses. That's the situation we're in today. And of course, in addition to that, Israel has cut off all humanitarian supplies into Gaza and electricity, fuel, and is basically giving an ultimatum. Either you agree that we can break the agreement or we will starve you. And there are conflicting reports about whether or not the U.S. specifically supports that or not. There certainly were reports that the Trump administration was giving Israel a free hand, in effect. It didn't specifically say they supported the cutoff of food, but that they were giving Israel a free hand. Meanwhile, it turns out, it was reported today in our press that representatives of the Trump administration have been negotiating directly with Hamas representatives in Doha, Qatar. And it was confirmed by the White House. And this is the first time that's ever happened, to my knowledge, that a U.S. official has been negotiating directly with Hamas. Previously, all the negotiations were sort of secondhand with intermediaries in it. And by the way, my friend Idal reports that this was known days ago in the Arabic language press, but only got reported today in English, which is typical of what happens. But just before this meeting started, Trump issued one of his fatwas on his own media site, and it's worth reading the paragraph in full, which contradicts the idea of negotiations, but here it is. Shalom Hamas means hello and goodbye. You can choose. Release all the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is, in capital letters, over for you. Only sick and twisted people keep bodies. By the way, that's a practice of the Israeli government as well as Hamas. Only sick and twisted people keep bodies, and you are sick and twisted. I am sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. I have just met with your former hostages whose lives you have destroyed. This is your last warning. For the leadership, now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have a chance. Also, for the people of Gaza, a beautiful future awaits you, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead, in capital letters. Make a smart decision, in capitals. Release all the hostages now, or they will be held to pay later. So that's just minutes ago, statement from the Trump. Now, what that means, how serious it is, and whether or not that contradicts the idea that his emissaries are actually negotiating with Hamas, nobody can tell. Nobody knows the mind of Donald Trump, even including Donald Trump. But that's a pretty threatening. That is, as it stands, the Israeli position, saying there's not going to be stage 2 or stage 3 of the ceasefire. Hamas has to release all its prisoners right away, or they will be held to pay. Now, we don't know whether that's serious or not, but it's certainly worrying for sure. So, meanwhile, the Arab League has issued its own plan for the reconstruction of Gaza, which is quite detailed, and it was unanimous, coming from Egypt in the first place, but then endorsed by the other Arab nations. And remember, Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia are allies of the United States. And their plan calls for a 5-year reconstruction of Gaza with nobody forced to leave while it's ongoing. So we don't know, which voice is speaking definitively or not, and it's a very scary time. And of course, among other things, the cut in electricity and fuel means that water purification and desalination in Gaza has been shut down. And so there is a certain amount of food. There's disagreements about how much there is and how long it could last, but certainly cutting off of water is a dire and immediate threat. So that's the situation now, and where it will be and how it will develop in the next couple of days, nobody knows. But it's a threat. The last word is that Trump is backing up Israel's explicit call for genocide in Gaza, basically. And of course, you all know he has designated some supplemental arms packages for Israel. It's a little confusing as to how much, but supposedly the total is that he's promised more than $12 billion in arms for Israel, which is to be paid for in the money that Congress has already given to Israel to buy the weapons. And these new weapons packages include thousands of one-ton bombs and some smaller bombs. And these have nothing to do with self-defense, right? A 2,000-pound bomb is not a defensive weapon. It's a weapon of mass destruction, especially in a crowded place like Gaza. It's thought that maybe this is a signal that these weapons are meant to threaten Iran rather than Gaza. Israel has been threatening to attack Iran, sometimes with the agreement and maybe even the participation of the U.S. And very worryingly, there are some reports that there have been joint air exercises in the coast of the Mediterranean near Israel of Israeli and U.S. aircraft, including B-52 bombers. Remember the mother of all bombs that Israel wants, the 30,000-pound bomb, bunker buster bomb. Israel has no aircraft that are capable of carrying that, but B-52s do. So it's a signal of upping the threat against Iran. And what will happen and whether that will take place, we don't know, because there are also contradictory talks that the Trump administration is interested in coming to an agreement with Iran. So it just makes you dizzy, all these contradictory messages, and we don't know which is the real one or not. And meanwhile, Trump, who spoke about backing free speech during his speech to Congress, issued an executive order threatening cutting off a funding of colleges that forbid what he called illegal demonstrations. And what that means is apparently any demonstration that supports Palestinian rights and criticizes Israel, and the deportation of foreign students who are caught in that. So it's free speech for everyone except about Israel. And the same time, they put a hold on all foreign aid except for Israel. So it's just hard to know what's going to happen in the next days. The only other thing to report about, you probably all know, the joint Palestinian-Israeli documentary, No Other Land, got the Academy Award, and people made pretty inspiring comments, political comments, in receiving the award. And it was kind of meaningful, significant that, again, Israel is losing the war of ideas on a large scale. I mean, for Hollywood to give that award to a Palestinian democracy documentary, Hollywood, as you all know, is heavily, heavily Jewish in its origins and all its personnel today. And the fact that they gave a standing ovation to a Palestinian filmmaker is a sign of, for Israel, that they are losing the Jews in America, and will double down on the evangelical Christians. So I may have left out all kinds of stuff, but that's all I can say right now. It's a very worrisome time, and if you go on Twitter, you'll see that quote from Donald Trump, which is very scary. Oh, one other thing, in terms of some of Trump's nominees for different positions in the Pentagon or the State Department are very worrying for Israel. A number of them are more or less realists, or people who see China as the big threat and wants the U.S. to retrench from the Middle East. And pro-Israel sources are kind of in a panic over that and trying to sideline these nominees. They're not for the top positions, but the second and third tier in the Pentagon and the State Department are people that the Israel lobby does not like and is worried about. And one of them even has a very far right background, anti-Semitic, apparently, legitimately anti-Semitic, and very meekly, the ADL is saying not that she should be barred from any public position, but that she should reconsider her past statements. A very mild thing compared to what they would say if a pro-Palestinian, a real pro-Palestinian person were nominated. They would demand the withdrawal of that nomination. So that's the state of the Israel lobby. They're trying to suck up to Trump as best they can, and under orders from Israel, no doubt. So I don't know what I'm leaving out, but that's all I can say right now.
Thanks, Jeff. Comments and questions? Susan.
Yeah, good comment that Lockport, Massachusetts will be showing No Other Land starting March 13th. So please come out to the North Shore and take a look at it. And the other piece of news associated with that is that I read that 1 billion people were watching the Academy Awards when those good speeches were given.
Right.
That's
unbelievable. By the way, some pro-Palestinian sources, wrongly, in my opinion, are sort of picking some issues with the speech made by the Israeli. Yeah, it wasn't a Palestinian. He was speaking as a Jewish Israeli. I thought, that glass is half full, not half empty. People who are sort of criticizing that he didn't say this, he didn't say that. I don't agree with that.
I agree.
So I'm Jeff. Besides just more awfulness, why is Israel bombing Damascus? I just just because they can, or I mean, it just,
Yes. And they also have this idea, especially for Syria, but it goes for many countries in the Middle East, of sort of fracturing them along ethnic and religious grounds. It's been Israeli policy for many years to try to sort of have good relations with ethnic minorities where they can, that opposing Arab nationalism. So they historically have had very close and political and military ties with the Kurds in Iran and Iraq, and with the Christians in Lebanon, and they're trying to do that with the Druze in Syria, not very successfully as far as I know. So they were happy to overthrow the Assad regime, but mainly because it left Syria weaker and more vulnerable. And of course, the new regime is not even making token resistance to Israel's bombing and territorial, invasion. So they're pretty happy with that. And they're flexing their muscles. They have not fully abided by the ceasefire agreement in Lebanon either. And this is their pattern. They will never abide by an agreement that's not favorable to them unless they're forced to do it. And it's very rare that they are forced to do that because the United States stands behind them.
thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Faye.
I heard they're showing no other land in Rockland, Maine. You said Rockport, right? Susan?
Rockport, Massachusetts at the.
Yeah, they're showing it in Rockland, Maine already for a couple of days.
Good.
And there's also, I don't know if this is true or not, but Channel 4 is streaming it somewhere. I
Channel
haven't
4 in the UK, not
in the
our
UK.
channel.
So does that mean we can't hear it?
I doubt it. I doubt if you can watch a movie on
Oh,
British television.
okay. Oh, too bad. And the other thing
Maybe you
is,
can.
I wanted to ask. I had read, I think, in the Jeffrey Sachs webinar about China. China had put forward a ceasefire plan, and that might have been a long time ago. I don't know, but I was wondering if you had heard anything about that, because I think China and because BRICS is playing a more important role in the world, and so I'm just wondering, if that's going to affect things, because things coming from here don't seem to matter that much, So do you know anything about that?
No.
No, okay. Well, I keep on looking for that because, I don't know if it would be effective or not, but sometimes I feel like if it's coming from here, nothing's going to happen, that if it comes from that the change is going to come from other countries, other places, the global south, places that I don't know very much about, to be honest. That's all. Thank you. Thank you for the report.
Thanks. Julie.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. As you know, my daughter lives in Jordan, and she told me that she was hearing that Lebanon is getting a US-backed president, and they're thinking of normalizing relations with Israel. Have you heard that too?
The first part is definitely true. I mean, the U.S. has its fingers, into Lebanese politics very deeply, and their main policy is to try to marginalize Hezbollah as a political and military force in Lebanon. Hezbollah did not oppose this new president that was elected by the parliament with the support of the U.S. So we don't know what's happening there, and I doubt if Lebanon right now is prepared to normalize with Israel. There'd be too much domestic opposition for that. It would cause kind of a civil war, I think, in Lebanon, in my opinion. But I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Okay, thanks. Next up is Paul.
Yeah, Jeff, on the Arab agreement, from I believe it was the meetings were in Egypt.
Yeah.
What was did it go into the creation of a Palestinian state? In other words, how much opposition did it give to Israel's plans for a political settlement?
So it definitely is opposed to moving the population of Gaza in any way. It proposes an interim peacekeeping force in Gaza, established by the UN Security Council, and then in the long term, but without going into much specific, it said there won't be a long-term peace in that region unless there is a Palestinian independent state. So I don't think they went into detail, but that's the united position of the Arab countries, including the U.S. allies. The big thing is that they want an international peacekeeping force there, which not necessarily a bad thing. Some Palestinians see this as a non-starter. It may not be bad because if there's an international force there, Israel will have a hard time resuming its bombing. They don't mind killing Palestinians, but they might be a little bit more reluctant to kill peacekeepers from other countries. So personally, that's not necessarily a bad idea.
Okay, hearing none, we will move on. If there's no more questions or comments for the political military, we'll go on to the legislative advocacy and policy section. Okay. Thank you. Let me just adjust the view. Okay, so next up is arms shipments to Israel, JRDs, under Restoration Act. I think, Jeff, you're going to do JRDs, is that right?
Yeah, there's not much to say. The arms shipments I talked about. The JRDs, I mean, the short story is, and we don't know the details, is there have been 4 resolutions proposed in the Senate by Bernie Sanders and 4 resolutions proposed in the House led by Rashida Tlaib and Jayapal. And neither one specifies. I guess I assume the legalities allow them to file kind of a bookmark for legislation without specifying now exactly which weapons it would oppose. At least I haven't seen it. So that's the situation. It has 13, the House version. There was not a House version of the JRD last year. There was only a Senate version. And I am not sure of all the legalities. I think it has to pass the Senate first before it goes to the House, but maybe not. Maybe they can do it at the same time. The difference is that at least in the Senate, the rules allow it to take precedence over any delay. So it has to be brought to a vote within a specified time frame. In the House, I'm not sure that applies, in which case, of course, the Republican House leadership will never allow those resolutions to advance out of committee. There are 13 co-sponsors of the House bills. I think they're all the same. And that includes Ayanna Pressley, but so far not Jim McGovern or Lynch, who sometimes has sponsored decent things. So I guess I don't know who's here from McGovern's district. It would be especially good for him to hear from people who are constituents that he should add his name to those and co-sponsor those. It may be, I already tried Lynch's office. That may be a longer shot for him. These resolutions go further than he has been willing to go in the past, but not impossible. And of course, nobody else is even imaginable in our state in the House of Representatives. So if people can get on McGovern's case, that would be helpful, I think. So I guess that's all I can say.
Thank you.
There haven't been details. The details haven't been made available yet. And I just found out today that there are 4 House bills, like the 4 Senate bills. It's HJ resolution, House Joint Resolution 68, 69, 70, and 71. And they all, I believe, have the same number of sponsors.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
Yeah, I think as people probably know, MAPPA has already sent out 2 action alerts relative to the JRDs, one before any of the JRDs were introduced, one since the Senate JRDs were introduced. And we're now thinking of planning to send a 3rd one out with the House JRDs. Cole, I wanted to ask you, how did the second, our last alert, go in terms of response?
I think it was pretty good. It was 550, I believe, took the action.
How many? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I think it was about 550.
Oh, good.
We also used it on last night's webinar. Harris Grumman talked about sort of the intersection of war and the Democratic Republican Party system. And so we used that as the action. So a number of people took the action last night as well.
Good. Great. Thank you.
So I'm willing, I talked to Susan earlier, I'm willing to work on the text of a alert if we're going to do it. But I guess I'd have to have some sense of when we have an opening to send it to get sufficiently motivated to finish the job.
Yeah, and let me jump in, and then I'll call on Pat and others. So I think it's time we set up a system of accountability, or let's say volunteer responsibility for each district. So we really should have one or more map of people that take on to convey these messages to the House offices when something like this comes up. And there's actually 2 for the House right now. One is the JRDs that Jeff just described. The other is the UNRWA bill. I think, Grace might talk about that. But just to rattle off my idea, in District 1, I don't think we have anybody clear. It is usually Mary, but she's away for a couple more months. So we need a rep in CD1. In CD2, it would be Claire Schaefer Duffy. In CD3, it would be Pat Westwater-Jong. In 4, it would be Susan Mirsky and Mary Ellen Kirkelos. Again, this is all assuming these people are willing to play the role, right? In 5, it would be Zarina Mammon and Noble Larson. In 6, it would be Susan Nicholson and Jill L. Ashkar. In 7, it would be Jeff Klein. In 8, it would be Jeff Klein and Claire Goslin. In 9, it would be Beth Varani and Linda Cohen. So there could be more people, and if other people want to get in on the act and take this responsibility, don't be shy. It intersects that a group of us are going down to Washington for in-person lobbying the 2nd week of April, and several new people have come in, who haven't taken this responsibility before. So I've named Claire Goslin, Linda Cohen, who haven't been part of our campaign as much, but they're nevertheless taking this on. So and for the senators, it would be Jeff and me. At least this is my idea. So we were hoping that we could kind of group all these people into a, liaison group where they would, send messages to the House office when it is needed and then get answers back. And over time, they would get to know the staff and become all the more effective lobbyists. And I welcome comments on this.
Let me just respond just quickly why I'm not trying to hog 2 congressional districts. The reason is the history. I've been back and forth between CD7 and CD8. I'm now in CD7, but I have known Lynch for decades, and I know and have had a long relationship with his staff. So I think it makes sense for me to continue to sort of intersect with him as well as Presley. Presley doesn't take much work to intersect with either, obviously. So
Okay, Pat.
Thanks. So as some of you are aware, Noble Larson and I were in Washington on Monday for other reasons and met with a junior foreign policy person in Markey's office and Mandy, who is the foreign policy person in Warren's office, and asked them to about the JRDs, about both co-sponsoring and voting for them, and mentioned why it's not in the U.S. and Israeli best interest to continue supporting, to not vote for these. And we gave reasons why it's important to co-sponsor and then vote for them. One of the things we said that may be helpful is that there's no neutral position on this, that if you don't voice your objection to this, then you are essentially saying you agree with it. One of the things that Mandy said to us first off about warrants, like, oh, it's so difficult, we have no tools. I said, or we have so little impact in order, so little ability to impact Trump's position. And I said, actually, you do have a tool. You have the JRD tool. And regardless of whether you impact what the United States does or not, that gives you the opportunity to voice your position. If you don't say anything, you're telling all these different groups, you're telling Trump, who can say, look, I don't even have any opposition in Congress. No one even signed on to the JRDs. You're telling the Democratic Party leaders that all the Democratic senators agree with this, in spite of the fact that the base doesn't. You're telling your base that you're in agreement with sending the weapons. You're telling the Palestinians that you agree with sending the weapons. You're telling we listed maybe 5 other groups that they are in fact making a statement whether they don't sign on to a JRD or whether they do. They're making a statement to a whole lot of different audiences. Bernie has on his trip across country. I don't think his office has been contacting the Senate offices the way it appears he did the first time. So we need to double up on our efforts. And one thing that Warren's foreign policy person told us is that she heard, and this is not a direct quote, that they were wanting offices who were less progressive to sign on to the JRDs. And I can see how people might want to do that, but in terms of a strategy, it doesn't make sense to cut out your core of people who are willing to do this and leave it to people who are not very interested in doing this to be the first people to step forward. So I don't think I don't understand that as a good strategy. And it means that we need to double down, because when we said, well, why haven't you? Said, well, we thought we're really not supposed to do that. We're waiting for people who are less progressive to stand up first. So I just think it's important to let them know that there is no neutral position on this when they don't stand up to use the JRD, and they may have to co-sponsor it, because if there aren't enough co-sponsors, Bernie may not decide to call for a vote. So they may not get the opportunity to vote if there aren't enough co-sponsors. I don't know, Cole, I'd like to hear your opinion about that.
Yeah, just to comment on this is that it looks like on this JRD filing, there's been a little division or different strategies within the community. It is true that peace advocates a few weeks ago were putting out that they wanted a more moderate individual to lead the charge, but that apparently did not happen. And Bernie filed it. So exactly whether everyone agreed that that was the right move at the time, I do not know. But that has happened. And so now I think that caution that they wanted more moderate senators in the lead, it seems to me that's no longer the case. I wrote to both Odelia and Kevin, National Peace Lobbyists, to see if they have any additional perspective, but I would assume that is, some way a cop out from Mandy, to be honest.
Right, but at least we should be aware that the Senate offices themselves may have heard that, and therefore may take extra work.
But once it's filed, to me, it doesn't make sense not to add.
Of course it doesn't, but some of the officers.
Bernie's in the lead. That's okay. Anyway, Abby.
Cole, a question about connecting the money for the weapons that go to Israel and the jobs in the United States. And I know we talked about this a long time ago, and I think you said somebody was working on this connection, but who's making the connection, and should it be in our messaging?
Well, absolutely. Actually, Harris Grumman's talk last night was all about this, but in a broad level, in terms of the overall military budget, the overall care economy, the overall politics of the Democratic and Republican Party. So I actually think it's pretty significant that he stepped forward to do that because he is the state leader of the SEIU. And guess who the care economy workers belong to? They are members of the SEIU. All the home care workers in Massachusetts are members of SEIU. They're his constituents. So this is a potential breakthrough in actually the labor movement really stepping forward to say, look, instead of spending all this money on the military, why don't you spend it on the care economy? But how that, and there's also an article on the MAPA website, and you can read that expresses this as well as last night's webinar. Now, as for tying it directly to Israel spending, I don't think we've seen as much of that, but it's absolutely a point that we can make. This stuff is expensive. Granted that there are weapon systems that the Pentagon buys that cost more than what it spends on Israel. Okay, Israel is not the bulk of the Pentagon budget, but it is a meaningful segment, and it's, you know, it's a lot of money to you or me. It's like they've spent already 20 billion, they're spending another 8. So this money really would matter to people if it were spent on healthcare, housing, and so on and so on. So we should make that point. Noble.
Just returning briefly to this question of the strategy that had been evidently adopted initially of going for more, quote, moderate or less progressive senators. I'm just dealing with the Senate version, which I find bizarre. And we have 25 activists here. I wonder if anybody can cite an example ever in the prior history of the anti-war movement where such a strategy was taken, where you abandoned, you just ignored your core base and went after, you know, people who are outside of the base. It just to me was a incomprehensible.
It doesn't mean you're ignoring your base. It's that you're trying to see. Look, what the hope is that now that Trump is president, some of these moderate Democrats will get off the fence and be willing to challenge funding to Israel when they were not before, when it was Biden. So to me, that is a reasonable political hope that some Democrats would change their position. And to signify that with a more moderate senator in the lead makes sense to me. But for whatever reason, it didn't work. And I'm not privy to exactly why not.
Well, just at the Senate office, at least the Warrens seemed to be getting the message that they weren't waiting for, you know, less progressive people. So I don't know. Something
we don't know about exactly how this came about, but anyway, here's where we are. So let's keep on working to get these senators and House members on these bills. Nick.
Yes, hi, thank you. I very much agree with what Noble was saying, and we have found repeatedly that Jim McGovern has always said, well, if you can get so-and-so to go on, that'll really help me. And it took a full year for him to acknowledge on the floor of the House that shipment of these weapons to Israel violates U.S. law. So the fact that any of these offices would take a position that it's a matter of some political, you know, mother may I, in the face of the fact that these are gross violations of U.S. law is really contemptible, in my opinion. And as far as this idea about where do we get money for social services and other things in the face of what's happening, we could have legislation introduced by any of these so-called liberal leaders to impose war profits taxes on all of these corporations that have been making billions of dollars over the last several years from wars in Ukraine and from the Gaza slaughter. So this kind of weakness and accommodation to what Trump is offering in terms of cutting taxes for the extremely wealthy on the idea that we really, and then cutting social services like we really need the money, the very wealthy have been making outrageous profits from the wars, as have their corporations. And we could be pushing for war profits taxes on all of these people that we can say are really being generated by genocide and an abject slaughter of Ukrainian and Russian people. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, I put in, just for illustrative purposes, the question I wanted to ask at Lynch's town hall on Monday, but also because I think it helps with the framing. I mean, people need to understand that Israel is a rich country. It has a per capita GDP higher than every country in Europe except Germany, higher than France, England, Italy, and so on. So, among other things, of course, it's heinous to send weapons to Israel under any circumstance. But I think it's legitimately to ask on behalf of U.S. taxpayers, if they want weapons, why should we pay for it rather than them paying for it? And again, I think that's something that resonates. No one ever asked this question in public. In other words, they need all these weapons to defend themselves and so on. Even if we accepted that, there's no comparative instance of a rich country getting weapons donated to them, and if the Israelis had to pay for these weapons, it would be an earthquake in their political, echelon. Their taxes would go up a lot, and they'd reconsider. So it's not the only reason to oppose this money, but I think it should be part of our messaging all along. Why should U.S. taxpayers be subsidizing Israeli taxpayers when, as everyone knows, there's all kinds of stuff we need to get done in this country.
Right. And since you're writing the next action alert, you have the opportunity.
I know. The problem, Susan also said, the problem is to keep an action alert in some, reasonable length, for people not to be put off. And I don't know if we can do it in the short run, but I think it should be part of our messaging in general, something like along those lines.
Okay, Abby.
If you've already said this, please ignore my question, but the link between my question and Jeff, what you just said, it seems to me that this is an American jobs program. It's not that we're paying for it. It's that our money is creating jobs for American workers. So I just don't get that.
You don't get what, Abby?
That is the point about the framing about, Israel's rich enough and we shouldn't be paying our taxes on them. But what they're using our money for is to pay salaries of U.S. workers building the weapons.
Yeah, that's true.
But if Israel paid for them, it would also employ for better or worse, if Israel were paying to buy these things, it would also employ American workers, only Israel would be paying and not U.S. taxpayers.
Well, I find that a very useful comment that you just said, and I think that's the link that needs to be made.
Well, it's part of it. Obviously, there's a morality part too. It's not just dollars and cents, but
people don't care about morality.
Yeah. So
people who sign our action alerts do care about morality.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. This has been a useful discussion. We're gonna keep on pressing both House and Senate to get on these bills about the JRD and also the UNRWA Restoration Act. Okay, the next up is the Grassroots Advocacy Days. That's going to be April 8th to 10th in Washington, D.C. We have, I believe, about 7 people from MAPA and that are planning to go on this trip and visit our 11 congressional offices, hopefully some of the members and also the staff, and talk to them about these bills as well as anything else that has developed in the coming few weeks. And we will attempt to bring in people at home by Zoom to the extent it works out. It can be awkward to bring a laptop into an office and you're trying to get people on Zoom, but we'll try. And others that would like to join, we welcome it. And we can work on the logistics of lodging and transportation and all that. Zarina and Julie are part of this team, and Grace, would any of you like to say a word about why you're going and what you think about this?
Okay, I'll go first. I'm going because first of all, we need to get out of town. Ken and I have been really busy with stuff and we need to go. But also what Pat said with Noble, go over there and just talk to them. Give us Catherine Clark's been really difficult to meet up with. Warren and Markey showed some character with their JRDs last last November, and hopefully it sounds like this time, but we really need more to make sure they understand that this is American money, that it could be used in America instead of rich Israel, and also they're taking over people's land and it's wrong. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, Grace.
Yeah, for a lot of the same reasons that Serena just said, but also I've personally have never lobbied before, like in person or anything. So, and also I'm from pretty close to the DC area, so it's always been something that's talked about a lot. So mainly for me too, it's also just a learning experience, and yeah, and just obviously these are really important issues and pieces of legislation. So yeah.
Thanks. And and spread the word to other Palestine advocacy groups in the state. You don't have to be a MAPA member to join in this grassroots lobby effort. Multiple national organizations are working together on it. Okay. I've lost track of my list here. 1 second. Okay, next up is the TIM and the Anti-Semitism Commission. Just to report back that we did sign off on Tim's principles of unity. There was some modifications of the details in response to our input. But it's perhaps, not exactly the way we would have written everything, but it is a strong statement, and it's important to have unity and to join with the other organizations working on TIM. So we signed off. The next hearing of the State Commission on Anti-Semitism is happening in Western Mass in Long Meadow this coming Tuesday. And I believe is that where Velas is from? He's from that area.
Meslika is from there.
Come again?
Meslika is from there.
Mass?
Meslika?
Maslika? Who's Maslika? Malaka.
That's what you call her, yes.
Okay, sorry. I can't pronounce her name as well as you, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think Velas is from there too, I think, pretty close.
Right, got it. Yep. Okay, and Tim is also organizing a retreat to step back, take a look at its project. I think looks like it's gonna be in the afternoon of Sunday, March 23rd. So make a note of that if you're interested in getting involved with this struggle around the proper definition of anti-Semitism and to prevent false charges of anti-Semitism to be used to suppress pro-Palestinian activism. What else? Somehow that triggered. Oh yeah, another initiative coming out of TIM, although it is not fully approved by everybody, is a People's Alternative Commission. So this would be a commission convened by TIM. It would have its own hearings and would bring up the experts to explain a proper way to frame anti-Semitism within the overall framework of racism and oppression and discrimination. So to relate anti-Semitism to other forms, where the false definition absolutizes anti-Semitism as a unique phenomenon with no counterpart. So those People's Commission hearings may happen in May. At least that's currently proposed, but stay tuned. Anything else on Tim? Otherwise, I'll move on. Candidate recruitment. Jeff or Grace, what's going on?
Yeah, so a major point at our meeting, we last met on this past Thursday, and we also discussed it further at the steering committee meeting, but just the future of what the candidate recruitment group looks like. I guess sort of the common consensus that we came to was that not much work can actually be done within this small group. Also, a lot of us who have been attending these meetings aren't in the CDs that we've been focusing on, so like CD1, 4, and 6. So there's not really much that we can actively do. We need to be more like support systems and maybe a committee that can advise different groups. But really what we need to do is reach out to organizing efforts within the CDs, tap into work that's already being done, or just sort of provide energy for those organizing efforts. And yeah, so sort of some of the ways we were trying to plan outreach for this was just reaching out to the MAPA district lists, maybe the MAPA board. Also have this be a point of conversation at the Arise and Resist conference. And also just really extend this outside of the MAPA Gaza sphere and the Gaza sphere in general, because we need to be a multi-issue platforms for any candidate recruitment. Yeah, so
Thanks. And I want to welcome Barry Hawk. He is an experienced campaign manager who works with us in CD4. And Barry, what is your thought about congressional challenge, whether to Auchincloss or to some of the other bad Democrats in the state?
I wouldn't focus on the congressman. I would depending on your goals, I would focus on local offices, state rep, state senator. These are the minor leagues where the Congress people come from. So I have other thoughts about it, but unless you're prepared to raise a lot of money, the environment in 2 years or a year and a half is going to be focused on Trump. Focused on hanging on to getting a majority in the House. And so I think that's where a lot of energy is going to go.
Okay, thanks. Others? Okay, so the direction is, at least according to Grace, is to try to work directly with activists in CD1, 4, and 6, and try to evaluate the possibility of aligning with other movements. This is not something the Palestine movement can do on its own, who may have a reason to challenge the Democratic incumbents. And then the other option is to go, as Barry advises, and look at the state rep level. Yeah.
I'll just add something. In order to really know the viability of candidates against an incumbent, you have to do basic research. There has to be a voting analysis, a political analysis, an assessment of how much money you can raise. And if you want to pick targets for Congress, then you have to go through that exercise. At minimum, we would need to raise money to do a polling in the state. And that could be, I don't know how much, but there's no credible candidate that would run for office without doing a poll first.
Great. Okay, Noble.
I was just going to say, add CD5 to the list. Is much of a long shot as it might be. I think defeating Clark would be a huge step forward, more so than any of the others. That's my thinking. Even Auchincloss.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, obviously Barry's comments are, worth noting. On the issue of running locally, maybe we should target the senator and representative who have been active in a very bad way on the state anti-Semitism committee. And sort of related to that, it's pretty easy to get non-binding ballot questions on state legislative or Senate districts. The number of signatures is small. And if we got a ballot question on, whether or not U.S. taxpayers should be funding Israel or not, it would put pressure on local local representatives and maybe help to get the worst of them out. So we have to develop that further, but it needs to happen over the summer, basically. And it's pretty easy to do. 200 signatures in a state legislative district is nothing. You could do that at a Little League baseball game, in one weekend. So we need to develop that more and figure out what plausible wording is. But I really think that's something we should pursue.
Well, just to be clear, that would be the spring and summer of 2026 for the
Right.
non-binding question at the state rep level. Okay,
Right. So
Gary?
we have plenty of time to work on that. But that's the time frame for recruiting candidates also is 2026. So
Well, I disagree with that. If you want to run for Congress, you better be talking about it right
no,
now.
I mean the deadline, the election. that we're
Official
talking
deadline, yeah. Okay, okay, Barry.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Jeff about that. We did some research on it for the last round, but it was too late. This was done before, I think in 2012 or 2010.
Yeah.
And I think it was maybe 6 or 7 rep or Senate districts. And the support for Palestine was overwhelming. Of course, those were different times than now, but we need to be organizing. We need to be organizing in the congressional districts if you want to have any impact. And you can organize through these non-binding referendums, which I think is a great vehicle. I mean, imagine like today, if we were able to say that in the last election, half a dozen communities voted for a permanent ceasefire in Palestine. So whether it's organizing towns for Palestine or organizing the non-binding referendum questions or other kinds of organizing, getting people involved and organizing and growing, begins, then we have something to, then we have some assets to deploy in any of these races.
Okay, Jeff.
Just another benefit of this is that it gets us out of our silos. And, we have to talk to people to get signatures. You have to be at community events and so on.
Right.
And that's a good thing. And so, our sort of default is to cling together and, talk to each other. But we need to get out more, as they say. So.
But I wonder if you can do it at the city level in the odd numbered years. I'm not sure in the rules on that. But Pat?
This is fascinating. Thank you for all these suggestions. I would really appreciate it if perhaps in the minute, because I'm sort of listening about we should be doing this at the state level. I'm not sure which of these suggestions we should be doing at the non-congressional level. So if hopefully in the minutes or something, there will be clear as to what different groups it makes sense to do take what different actions. I apologize that as I'm hearing these suggestions, like, oh, great. But I'm not catching it all myself. So if it could be sort of outlined in the minutes or some way for me to get it later and then be able to pass it on, that would be terrific. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's keep moving. Thank you for the good discussion. Let's go on to the divestment campaign. Paul?
Okay, thanks, Cole. Well, people know that we have a bill filed in the House, in the Massachusetts legislature, which if passed would force the Massachusetts State Pension Plan to divest its stock, its ownership assets in the companies that are presently making weapons, selling weapons to Israel. So this would be a very nice thing. The purpose of the campaign, however, is much more realistic than that. Since there's not a chance on earth right now that the Massachusetts legislature would pass such a bill. But we do get a hearing for that bill. We have a chance to meet with legislators to stir up some controversy and get as far as we can with it. But the campaign itself is focused on building a group, a campaign of people who would operate at different levels Some might call their representatives, some might come to actions, some might do all kinds of different things, but that people would consciously feel that they belong to a Massachusetts-wide divestment campaign. This would not focus just on the Massachusetts legislature. Obviously, we would use the bill to say there is this bill in the legislature, and Massachusetts has an opportunity to protest all these weapons going to Israel by going after the companies that are making them. In Smith College last week, the students there called for divestment, and they called on the community to come to Smith and to support them. That's ideally what this campaign would do. Provide non-students to efforts, any effort focused on divestment, whether it's at Harvard, Smith, UMass, Amherst, wherever. So to get this campaign going, we'll be having educational events. We had one last week. A good number of people showed up. Many of you did. That was great. But we want to build the group that has some focus, given everything else that's going on, some focus on the divestment campaign, since so many people have been focusing on it over the last couple of years. We're going to start by having people go to their representatives at the State House and ask them to sign on as a co-sponsor to this bill. Those will be interesting conversations in themselves. We're going to have a practice lobby day, lobby workshop, I should say, next Wednesday, the 12th at 6:30. And we'll be inviting whoever is interested in learning about this divestment issue, what this bill says, how much stock is owned in these companies, all these types of basic things, so that people feel confident in being able to go to their state rep and asking them to sign on as a co-sponsor. That's the least we can do to support Erica Uterhoven, who is the only person in the state legislature, as far as we can tell, who would have been willing to file such a bill. So let's use it as much as we can. There will be a lot of direct actions at different sites of places that own stock in these companies, and especially, of course, at the State House itself. We are working now with American Friends Service Committee, National Divestment Campaign, which provides resources, research, tools, ideas for divestment to groups around the country who are focused on divestment. So we are hoping that this could turn into a statewide campaign, and we're asking as many people as possible who think that this is a good idea to attach yourselves to this campaign in one way or another, even if it's just being on an email list. We'll be having a webinar on the weapons going to Israel, what they are, who's making them, how to divest, all this type of stuff. We'll be having webinars starting sometime probably the beginning of April, the end of March, so that we can all learn the specifics of this. Remember, these companies that are making weapons for Israel, these are the big companies that get 40 to 50% of the entire U.S. military budget for weapons, from nuclear weapons to everything under the sun. And Israel is just a part of their business. It's the part that we can focus on now. And by focusing on it, hopefully we can put pressure on our country to cut off military supplies to Israel. So I'm going to put my email in the chat if anyone is interested in being added to the list of people in support of the campaign, and anyone is interested in coming next Wednesday to this lobbying, this workshop on lobbying around this particular bill. And Nick Moturn I think he's still here. Yeah, Nick is here. Nick and Dan Dan Laughlin and myself will be conducting that workshop. Nick has been working very hard on L3 Harris, one of the companies providing weapons to Israel out in Western Mass. And we'll see how far we can get with this campaign, and hopefully will help us to build sentiment against weapons to Israel.
Okay, thank you. Faye?
Yeah, there's another divestment bill. It doesn't mention Israel, but it talks about weapons. And I'm going to find out about it tomorrow. And I was going to mention in Quincy, this bill that that you're talking about, Paul, that that I want to work on. So so maybe we can get more people involved. Like in both of those things. So I think is it 3630? I think the other one, it's from BDS. It's a BDS divestment bill. And this one is not 3630, correct?
I think it is 3630, HD
Oh,
3630, but both
okay.
of those bills are part of the Mass Peace Action legislative package at the State House, together with another bill calling for to put controls over all these legislators taking these trips to Israel, being paid by Israeli lobbyists. So that's another bill connected in one way or another to Israel. But there are other important bills as well on nuclear weapons, etc.
Yeah, MAPA.
Well, I'm just going to find.
MAPA has filed a package of 5 bills called the Peace and Justice Agenda. I've put it in the chat, and one of them is a responsible investment bill. I suspect that's the one you're talking about, Faye. And you look in the chat, you'll get all those bill numbers, but the responsible investment is HD 3001.
Okay.
Yeah, so all these bills are great and important, but this one bill is the only one that mentions Israel.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I know that on the other bill that there are people already planning to meet with state senator in our district. So yeah, it would just be good to keep track of who's doing what and how they all interact. So I'll find out tomorrow, and I'm going to give people the information that you gave us, Paul, about this bill. As much as I know.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks, Faye.
Yeah, sure.
Zarina, did you have something?
Yes, I did. Thanks, Cole. So I did go to the educational event that Paul mentioned about the other last week, and that was really good. I really enjoyed learning a lot. And some of the companies are 90% funding rely on the funding from Pentagon. I wanted to raise my hand for Pat. I don't put in all the details in the notes. I write down who said what, the idea, the main point, and then what you need to do is contact that person possibly if you want to know more, because I can't write down every single word. And even if I did, it doesn't make sense half the time. So I'm just written versus said. It's just different. Thank you.
Thank you, Zarina, for taking all this detailed notes. Beth.
Yeah.
Yes, a small group of us met with the new representative of the Outer Cape, Hadley Luddy. I was an honorary member of the Outer Cape. But what we did is we also invited a reporter from the Cape Times and a reporter from the local Provincetown Independent to join us. And the P-Town Independent reporter joined us, took our names, and we're waiting to see what might come out in publication. But that's also just kind of an add-on to our meetings with reps. I mean, some of these folks are just looking for something to write about. That's all.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Beth. That's a great idea.
Okay, Louise, you have something? You're muted, Louise.
I was just going to ask if you could email me or Cole, and then he could send it out or whatever, the names of the reporter, the person you were just talking about from the Cape paper. And who did someone come from the other paper you mentioned? Was that the New Bedford one?
No, the Cape Cod Times. No one came from the Cape Times.
Okay. 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 Yeah. If you could, I like to keep track of who shows
Sure.
up.
We do have a contact person though, a woman who covered one of our protests, so I can pass that along.
Yeah. Anything is helpful. Thank you very much. Great.
Yeah, Louise does publicize our events to the press. When we have a public event, we send out a press release and she calls the press to get them interested and remind them to show up. So that's a huge piece that she does. Okay, it's getting late. We have a few events to go through, and I just want to move on to that now. First is the idea of direct action in case of a ceasefire breakdown. Jeff, you were talking about this last night. I wondered if you could share that idea.
Yeah, nothing specific. It's just that I guess if we're going to do this on some kind of a large scale, we have to start sort of planning for it now, and not just MAPPA, but with the other organizations that are, part of our movement. And so I don't know how much buy-in there is for that from other organizations. The Boston Coalition for Palestine has been having a standout every Tuesday at the Israeli consulate, but it's small. Should Israel launch a full-scale bombing attack against Gaza, which is possible, it would be meaningful if we were able to organize a massive turnout there, including maybe civil disobedience. The Israeli consulate is in the Park Plaza Hotel, and the lobby is open. The consulate is on some higher floor, but in theory, people could invade the lobby and lie down and risk getting arrested. And so
That's
I
right
don't know
in
if people
Copley
have
Square.
ideas how we could organize this, how we could get the word out on this. I'd welcome it. It's just the ideas as far as I've gotten, and I floated it to the Boston Coalition for Palestine list with one sort of thumbs up, but not much in the way of response. So
my input on that, Jeff, would be to actually write up sort of a draft plan that you're trying to get people to embrace.
Yeah,
they might have comments on certain details. Maybe they think you should do it upstairs instead of the lobby or whatever they think. Is it like the day after the action or 2 days after? Try to get those specifics down. That way, it's going to be easier when the event happens. We have a plan that we've already discussed, and we're ready to swing into action.
yeah, that's a good idea. Is there anyone interested in working on this? I'm hoping to get the direct action team involved.
I could try to do what I can do, but it's right in Copley Square, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's
Okay.
really in Park Square. It's a couple blocks
Square.
from Copley Square.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. But yeah, lately, because I've been working on the WGBH event that happens at the Newspeak Cafe in the library, I've been meeting more and more people from different peace groups who live in that neighborhood. So, like some back from the Bring people.
Yeah, go ahead.
So anyway,
But this
we're
would be a
glad to
plan
help.
to get some people pre-signed up to risk arrest
Right.
in order to
Right.
get publicity and to show that there's strong opposition if that event happens, if Israel breaks the ceasefire in a big way.
It may possibly happen sooner, but assuming not, it's something we can raise at the Arise and Resist conference. In 10 days, where we'll have a lot more people there from a lot different organizations. So not wanting to back out of doing the work, just who the audience is a little hard to get at.
So the people in the direct action team, Paul, Julie, I guess Jill is not here tonight. Paul?
Sure.
Do you want to make a comment?
Well, I think we have to be ready for this. This is going to be huge. This has got to be huge.
Okay. So can the direct action team, help us to prepare plans so we're ready to swing into action? To me, this would be best done like the day after the news event. So you need to have people pre-signed up and have a tactical plan ready.
I'm wondering whether it might make
sense and everything.
Jeff, you've got to go to a lot of meetings already, but if you could meet with our direct action group, or maybe some of us could meet separately with you at a time that's convenient for you. to start to talk this through.
I'm if there's an upcoming meeting, and I can make it, I could make it. I could
Yeah, what
try.
is it, 5 o'clock on Friday? I can never remember, Julie.
Someone
Yeah,
can-
this week it's 4:30.
4:30 on Friday.
4:30, yeah, on Friday.
Julie, you're leaving town shortly. Is that the?
I am in about 10 days, yeah.
Okay. Well, and Jill is around, but she's obviously super busy.
Yeah, but she'll be coming to that meeting.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, if someone reminds me about it and sends me the Zoom link, if my flesh is willing and able, I'll try to make it there.
Yeah,
I'll send it right
I think
now,
we can put
Jeff.
that on the agenda, don't you, Julie?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, Faye, did you have something about this? Or is that no?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't lower my
Yeah.
hand.
Julie? Yep. All right. Okay, so you guys are going to talk this on Friday. Thank you for getting that going. Let's go to the next one, which is the medical impact on the Gaza healthcare system. The event was held this past Saturday. Margaret and Julie, can you report back on how it went and next steps?
Okay, so had 184 people signed up, between 30 and 40 in person. In terms of medical signups, Eyewitness Palestine had 3 healthcare professionals sign up, in spite of the fact that Nancy Mansour was ill that day and she couldn't come, but nonetheless 3 signed up. 3 also signed up for, at least 3 signed up for Health for Palestine with Dr. Wispelway going to the West Bank. There was a DAG presence at the event, and so we're gonna that will continue both in Springfield and in Providence. I've already been in contact with Karawa to follow up in terms of specific topics that she may wish to pursue for Doctors Against Genocide. We had 8 sponsors, made more contacts there. Excellent reviews from a lot of people. It wasn't just Massachusetts that showed up. We had people from Canada, California, down a little bit around Washington. All costs were paid for our people flying in. CCB. We had an excellent AV person come in, help us out there. Outstanding job. She'll probably come to our other events as well. Thank yous were sent out today, seeking further feedback so we can do make some whatever improvements we might want to make. Next steps, we're looking at venue. We have 4 choices. We've already gone through 2 already, so we're looking at the next 4 for venue in Springfield. We got excellent groups that we're going to work with. River Valley for Gaza Health, Healthcare Workers for Palestine out of Connecticut. Pax Christi is helping out. Marianne Sarah is giving advice as needed. So there you go.
Great, thank you, Margaret. Louise.
Just a request that maybe for the upcoming events kind of thing, if you could give me like maybe a day and a half notice, send the press advisory or whatever earlier, then I have more time to try to get hold of people. Thank you. Because it's really an interesting event.
Sure, we'll do that.
All right.
Thank
you. Okay. Great. Is that a hand, Julie? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I just looked at the YouTube, whatever video, and there were 488 views of that so far. So in addition to the other who came and were on the webinar.
Great. Thank you. Paul?
Well, just quickly, given the quality of the event, it's an event that larger parts of the Gaza movement should see. I know I'd like to see it. I'd just like to bring up the idea of possibly showing the recording as a webinar. on an evening, some weekday evening, as an official Mass Peace Action webinar. We've done it once or twice in the past with movies and stuff like that, but if this event is as good as people say it is, I think it's all of us should see it.
And I might also add that one of our speakers in particular, Dr. Othman Mohammed, has some really interesting, he gave the mental health perspective there as an expert, has some very interesting thoughts that he put out, which everybody can hear in the video, and which will be piggybacked on in our next either Springfield or Providence.
Yeah, sorry to be a little difficult. I see 182 views on YouTube rather than 400. So we can, maybe there's different places we're looking or something like that. But
182. I saw
yeah.
488.
Okay. Take a picture the next time you see that.
I will. I will.
All right. But but in terms of the suggestion to show it as a webinar, Paul, I think you should take that to Abby because she is in charge of our webinar program to try to schedule everything together. We've never shown a pre-recorded video as a webinar, but there's always a first time and maybe it would work. Okay, like to move on. We have a protest at Harvard. Actually, it was first announced as Harvard Business School, but it seems to be Harvard Kennedy School. Tomorrow at 4:30, Naftali Bennett, who was Prime Minister of Israel about 3 years ago, is going to be giving a talk at Harvard. And this is called by the Harvard student, Harvard Out of Occupied Palestine group. I'll just share the screen briefly so you can see it. Here's the event notice. Emergency rally. Harvard hosts former Israeli Prime Minister. Thursday, 4:15, John F. Kennedy Memorial Park. And then Naftali Bennett has said, I've killed lots of Arabs in my life, and there's no problem with that. I will do everything in my power to prevent a Palestinian state. So that's where he comes from. So hope people can turn out to that and support the students.
Where is it, on JFK?
It's at the JFK Park, which is the park at the corner of JFK Street and Memorial Drive, right next to Harvard Kennedy School. Just struggling to find my agenda here. I'm sorry. Where is it? There it is. Okay. All right. Next up.
Do you know, Cole, who's sponsoring his?
Yeah, I just mentioned that it was the Harvard Out of Occupied Palestine, the student group at Harvard.
Yeah, they're doing the demonstration. I'm saying, who invited him?
Oh, well, it says in their post that it was the Harvard Israel Business Club.
Okay.
And they, the group has a message here with more detail. Okay. So 2 events on Saturday have come under pro-Israeli opposition, and those local groups are asking us for help in terms of turning out to add to the numbers. The first one is the Needham group. Actually, Barry, are you still here? Barry is one of the people behind that event. Do you want to say a word about that action?
Yeah, it was kind of prompted because our group, which is fairly new, we've only had 3 standouts so far. We started the first week of January. We were attacked on the Facebook Needham page with kind of the usual stuff, but included our photographs that we were terrorists, that we were supporting Hamas. And there were Needham people, and we're not sure if that's going to turn into, counter demonstrators or not. But we've called for support from our friends and allies, and there's the details. The details there. We have marshals. We have a safety protocol that we've developed, and we want people to be safe, but we want people to show up.
Great, thanks, Barry. I'm planning to be there and hope others can also join us that day.
Thank you.
On the same day, the Watertown group is
Right.
Watertown Citizens for Peace and Environmental Safety. I forget the exact acronym, I'm sorry.
Peace, justice, and
Peace,
environment.
Justice, and the Environment, thank you, are showing the film Israelism. They've had the worst time getting a venue in Watertown where they can show this film. They've scheduled 2 different churches, and each time somehow somebody got to the church elders and it was canceled. They're now in the town library this Saturday at 2 p.m. and they're afraid of counter protesters there, and they're asking for numbers to come out. And it is a good film, so it's well worth, and it's convenient to Needham, so I'm planning to make a drive to Needham and then Watertown, so we can hit 2 events in one afternoon. So I hope everyone can make it to those. Next up is Arise and Resist. That's the conference addressing both Palestine and anti-Trump organizing. A week from Saturday the 15th, it's at 1991 Mass Ave in Cambridge. That is the church where MAPPA's office is located. So for an extra bonus, you can see our office. One of the breakouts will be held in our office. But it is more of a working conference compared to the one we held on January 19th. We have no keynote speakers with lofty rhetoric. Rather, we have 4 projects that we're trying to build and get off the ground. We have a rapid response network. We have a budget and taxes group that's probably going to do a protest on tax day and intervene in the federal budget. There is a possibility of a federal budget shutdown in about, 10 days or less, 9 days. There's a protest or outreach activity at Concord on the anniversary of 250th anniversary of Concord and Lexington on April 19th. And the 4th one is a Palestine Solidarity, which is an attempt to group a number of Palestine activist groups in Massachusetts to work together on an ongoing basis. So I hope people here will register for that conference and show up and participate in the Palestine group or in another group if you'd rather, to build those projects. Comments?
Cole, the Concord action for the 250th anniversary, the word is that Trump will be coming to that.
Yeah, I don't know how solid that is. He said he was coming, but he says a lot of things. So I don't know whether it's considered confirmed, but yes, there is definitely talk that he's coming. It will be a big event, even if he doesn't come. But if he comes, it will be a huge brouhaha, right?
Sounds awful.
Because obviously, I don't have to tell you that Concord is not the most pro-Trump town in Massachusetts. It is not. Okay. Healthcare occupation and assault on Gaza. Is Abby still here? I don't think she is. Is Julie still here? But this is a talk. It's a webinar on March 17th, which is a Monday, by a doctor who is talking about the impact of the Gaza war and also the West Bank violence on, children and medical workers, and he's just returned from the West Bank. I think he's just returned from the West Bank. So, and then there is so we're co-sponsoring one on pro-Palestinian activism on the 23rd. That unfortunately conflicts with Tim's retreat that I mentioned earlier. So you've got to pick which one you're going to. But this is organized by Community Alliance for Peace and Justice. That's Malaka Samdani's group in Western Mass. And she has 2 significant speakers. And then we are working on a Phyllis Bennis book talk. She has rewritten her book about Palestine, Israel. And it will be presented at a book talk on Sunday, April 6th in Cambridge. And there's a team in MAPPA that is working to organize that event. It's meeting on Friday. So if anybody wants in to help us organize that event, we will welcome you.
That's at 1 o'clock, right?
I forget the time, Louise. I can look it up.
I'll look it up. That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually at 3 o'clock, according to my notes.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. The meeting, I mean, this Friday. The actual
Right.
Yeah, probably 2 o'clock.
Yep.
And it's being recorded, as I understand, right?
I
It's
think we'll
being-
probably record it, yeah. So Phyllis is on book tour. She'll be giving several talks in the area. She's talking at Amherst, New Haven, I think maybe some others. I know Beth was interested in organizing one, as was Bonnie. And also, I believe she's going down to the Mid-Atlantic states after New England. So this will, should be sort of brainstorming around. This should be a good book for people who are confused about Israel Palestine or need to look up arguments to convince people or to answer objections. It also would probably be a good book for book study groups and students and things like that. MAPPA has used Phyllis Bennis's books for this purpose in the past. Okay, that's it for our events. It's late. There's a note here about Samantha. Zarina, do you want to explain that one?
No, I just added that she wrote down something about people to see what their tax dollars are doing. There was a website. So she wanted to have people look at that. Also, Karishma had written something about she wanted to know who was the person that that Jeff mentioned, the person not in favor of not favored by ADL, Anti-Defamation League. Jeff, do you know? Is he still around? Guess he's not around.
Okay. Okay, any other items for open discussion? It's late, so let's not prolong it, but if there's anything you want to share, this would be the moment. If not, thank you everyone for joining.
Well,
Thank you for
Cole?
everything you do. Let's keep it up.
Shoot. Cole, can I just mention one thing? I put in this chat, but I'm not sure people saw.
What did you put in the chat, Pat?
Just that there's a town marquee also on Saturday. Marquee's having a town
Okay,
hall.
at Malden, all right.
It might be not, hopefully some people, and they're Palestine for Malta for Palestine people, hopefully some of them will at least attend. So there's some people in the audience to applaud if a question about Palestine gets asked or to talk to them afterwards about it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Others? Okay, let's wrap. Thanks, everyone. Onward we go. Free Palestine.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Palestine.